Hey, welcome to another edition of the Faith and Finance Newsletter. I'm your host, Nick Garofalo. I'm a husband, a dad, and a disciple of Jesus, trying to work this thing out one day at a time. And you're here with me on the adventure, so thanks for coming. I know that this is a finance newsletter, so bear with me for just a minute. Okay, I got to set the stage for something. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, is this really it? You did the things. You built the career. You bought the dream house. You tithed more than you spent. You showed up for those who depended on you. And yet, somehow underneath it all, there's an ache that you just can't quite name. Loved ones get sick, or we do. Those career dreams that we chased have resulted in an endless monotony or a constantly fear-inducing cycle of change and new normals. Our friends can disappoint us. Our bodies will fail us. And even God, in all of his splendor and glory, can land in our hearts quite different than we may have expected him. That ache, usually most prominent first thing in the morning or late at night, leaves you wondering if the whole arrangement is everything it was supposed to be. If you felt that, I want you to know two things. First, you, my dear friend, are not the only one. Most of the Christians that I respect carry some version of that ache. They don't always talk about it much, but they do carry it with them. And second thing, the ache is not the problem. In fact, it's the point of today's conversation. So let's pick up the story of two of Jesus' disciples. They're walking the 7-mile journey from Jerusalem to Emmaus on the third day after the crucifixion. Now, if you already know the spoiler alert of the third day, just hang with me here in the raw disappointment of this moment. These disciples were leaving Jerusalem. They were walking away from the holy city. They weren't necessarily renouncing anything. They were just walking heads down. The whole project had literally collapsed in front of them. Rome won, and they were going home. As they're walking, a stranger falls in beside them and just starts to strike up conversation and says, "What are you guys talking about?" And then comes one of the most heartbreaking lines in the New Testament. "Oh, well, we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel." He, of course, they're referring to as Jesus. And notice the tense of that verb. It is not "we hope he is." It's not "we were hoping he would." It is "we had hoped that he was." All past tense, all done, over, books closed. It's written in the stone. They were grieving the death of a future around which they had erected their entire lives, their entire existence and identity. And the hilarious irony is that the risen Christ was literally walking right next to them while they did it. And he let them grieve. He let them say it out loud, and he didn't correct their disappointment before he honored it. That scene is doing something that many of us in the modern church are honestly afraid to do. It's making room for the haunting. So the instinct in a lot of Christian circles is to silence that haunting quickly. Be more grateful, be more humble. Look how much God has done for you. What do you mean, is this it? This is great. Everything's wonderful. And I totally understand that impulse. Gratitude is very, very real, and entitlement is just as real. There are seasons when the right answer to a complaint is, hey, you really need to count your blessings. But applied as a default, that posture flattens something that the Bible takes very seriously. And it treats discontent as a defect to be scolded down and hushed and silenced, instead of a signal to be listened to and leaned into. C.S. Lewis named the problem more honestly than most of us do when he said, we are not creatures whose desires are too strong. He said, rather, we are creatures whose desires are too weak. We make mud pies in a slum because we cannot imagine what is meant by a holiday at the sea. A rather staggering indictment when you really pause to think about it. Well, the disciples on the Emmaus Road weren't disappointed because they wanted too much from Jesus. Let me say that again. Those disciples, they were not disappointed because they wanted too much from Jesus. They wanted too little. They had wanted a political Messiah, right? They wanted freedom from the bondage of Rome, and he instead was offering the renewal of all things through the kind of the replanting of the garden to restore the earth. He was offering freedom from the bondage of sin. And this is the pattern. We don't suffer because our desires are just too great for our God. We suffer because they're ridiculously undersized. They're small enough to almost be satisfied in this life. And that is almost the worst place to live. And so here's where the finance part starts to matter, okay? And I'll spend the next several weeks on it. A lot of what we do with money, all right, listen, a lot of what we do with money is just an attempt to medicate the haunting. The next house, the next title, renovating that house, better vacations, the bigger plate, the cooler car, all of that stuff. We're not bad people for wanting these things, right? We are people just trying to engineer a private Eden because the real one was lost a long time ago, and we can't quite stop reaching for it. The Christian financial planning world has a counter move for this, and it is a good one as far as it goes. We talk about finish lines, lifestyle caps, your enough number, stewardship over consumption. And listen, I wholeheartedly believe in all of that, and I help my clients think through that for a living, okay? Hear my endorsement. Big fan of all that stuff. However, a finish line by itself doesn't answer the haunting either. It just changes which side of the metaphorical fence you're trying to climb. Because if you treat the finish line as the destination, you just replaced one engineered Eden with another. It's the same project, smaller footprint. And if we're not careful, the work really is just to suppress our desires in this life in the name of altruism and generosity. But the work underneath the work is dealing with that desire at its core, what you actually want, what you've trained yourself to settle for, and what you've been told to stop wanting because it sounded either too spiritual, too greedy, or just too inconvenient. Augustine put it rather cleanly when he said that the entire life of a good Christian is, in fact, an exercise of holy desire, not the suppression of desire, not capping your desire, the exercise of it pointed in the right direction. So before we get to finish lines and the math of enough and all that stuff, which we will starting hopefully next week, I want to leave you with two things, a permission and a question. The permission is simply this. If you have a low-grade ache, my friend, that will not go away, you do not have to apologize for it or argue yourself out of it. That ache may be the most honest part of you. And if the risen Christ walked 7 miles next to 2 men who were grieving him, he can certainly handle yours. That's number one, is permission. Number two is a question. So when you feel that haunting, what do you do with it? Most of us reach for something. A screen to distract it away, a snack to sate it away, a credit card to soothe it away, a project, a plan, something, right? We reach for something to medicate that ache very, very frequently. But what if it's a whisper? And the whisper is asking you to long for something far larger, far grander than the thing that you keep reaching for. That's all for today. Next week, hopefully we'll talk about why your finish line is the wrong place to land and the better question that is hiding underneath it. Until next time, I'm Nick. I hope you have a wonderful week.